I reckon it'd be fair to say that most people have a basic understanding of the history of European settlement of Australia. The conventional story goes a little like this. 1788, the first fleet, packed full of convicts, arrived in what was later to become known as Sydney Cove. They established a small colony. They struggled on through great adversity and hardship to become a vibrant, dynamic new nation, that nation that was to become Australia. There is, however, one small and extraordinarily significant place that's often left out of the narrative about the development and success of that first colony in Sydney, Australia. That place, Norfolk Island. In 1774, on his second voyage of discovery to the South Pacific, Captain James Cook found Norfolk Island. There were three things of importance that he reported back to the Admiralty. One was the Norfolk Island pine. He felt that it could be useful for spars and masts for Admiralty ships. The second was the local flax, it's a Formium tenax, that it could be converted into fabric and ropes, so therefore obviously useful to the Navy as well. And the third was that there was the possibility of building a good quality port somewhere on the island. All of this added up to the fact that Norfolk Island could well have been strategically important. As a result of Cook's discovery and his subsequent report, the first fleet arrived in Sydney with a second mission, and that mission was to get out to Norfolk Island as quickly as practical and establish a small colony. So, just 3 short months after arriving in Sydney Cove, a party of around 20 people under the command of Philip Gidley King, later to become Governor of New South Wales, went to Norfolk Island and established what was effectively a prison farm. These farms went on to be some of the most successful in the early colony and to become Australia's first true sustainable farming ventures. This small First Fleet sub-colony was reasonably successful pretty quickly. Probably hardly surprising when you consider the deep, rich volcanic soils, the reasonably reliable moisture, and the year-round mild climate of Norfolk Island. Basically completely the opposite of what they were experiencing in Sydney Cove. They were so successful, in fact, that on a number of occasions they re-provisioned the Sydney colony to prevent the population from starving to death. Now, don't get the impression it was all smooth sailing out here. They had their fair share of trials and tribulations, particularly after the sinking of the First Fleet flagship, the Sirius, on the reefs in Slaughter Bay. Along the banks of the permanent spring-fed watercourse that runs through today's World Heritage listed Arthur's Vale was where the First Fleet farmers set up shop. So I guess it's little surprise that it's around this area in Arthur's Vale that you find the most significant ruins from these First Fleet farms. On mainland Australia, if you go looking for First Fleet history, chances are you're going to find yourself in a museum or following a series of interpretive plaques on a walkway somewhere. Now let me tell you, it's very, very different out here on Norfolk Island. You're surrounded by history from all of the different eras of settlement. It's very real. This little cottage behind me, for example, is thought to have been built in the 1790s. Now, if that's correct, this could possibly be a near intact surviving First Fleet farmer's cottage. How cool is that? And it's not just about built history. These feral chooks that roam the island are thought to be descendants from First Fleet escapees. And there's also many garden and food plants that may well trace their lineage straight back to the First Fleet. The population of this generally prosperous colony reached its peak at over 1,100 people. By 1796 there were free settler land grants in beautiful places such as this that's today called Music Valley. But then in 1814 it all ended. In a decision that seemed to have more to do with politics than practicality, it was decided in 1814 to abandon the Norfolk Island settlement. The free settler farmers who had built their farms from the raw earth, who had raised their families here, were evicted from their farms and from the island. Their properties in most cases were then burnt to the ground, and the settlement and the island were completely abandoned. So what it all comes down to is this. The 1788 First Fleet colony on Norfolk Island was far from a dumping ground for convicts. It was in fact a thriving farming settlement that went on to save Sydney Cove from starvation on a number of occasions. It's fair to say that without Norfolk Island, Sydney may not have survived in its first settlement. It's a story that's not often told, but Norfolk Island played a critical role in the development of the Sydney colony and eventually Australia as a nation.